Hi, and welcome to another episode of the 8-Bit Retro Refix. And on this week's episode, we're going to be converting a Commodore 64 from PAL to NTSC. Sounds a bit strange that, doesn't it? Normally gets the other way around. There's reasons why I want to do this, but we'll get to that later on in the video. If you are enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell for all the up and coming videos. If you want to chat to me or you want to come and join the groups, where I am in Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. So that's what we're going to do this week. So let's get to it. Right, so what you can see in front of us is the NTSC bread bin that I've converted already. So what I'm going to do is take you through step by step on how to convert a PAL system over to NTSC. Some of you are probably asking, why the hell would I want to convert one from PAL to NTSC? Well, mainly because the NTSC are not 100% backwards compatible with PAL. Most of the games don't work, so normally people do it the other way around, so they want to convert it from PAL to from NTSC to PAL, so they get best of both worlds. The clock crystals are slightly different, which I'll pop a picture up. What I'm going to do is throw some pictures up and I'll talk you through what we've done. So the clock crystals are different. So when you're looking at a NTSC clock crystal, they're at a 14.31818 megahertz crystal, and the PALs are at 17.734475 megahertz crystal. Sounds a little bit strange in there, but changing them crystals actually makes the NTSC system run faster. Is it faster? One other way. Anyway, which hence doesn't make the games compatible. Sometimes you put them on, the sound really, really fast. You might have watched Adrian's Digital Basement, where he's said in the past, this doesn't sound right to him because he's running that Donkey Kong video on a PAL unit, which sounds really horrible to him. It doesn't sound right. So that's why we do it. So the reason why I wanted to change it from a PAL to NTSC, recently I've been beta testing cartridges and games for software developers for up and coming games. I'm not allowed to say what they are. I would love to say what they are. In fact, it's very, very hard for me to keep my gob shut, but I am doing. I really want to talk to you guys about what I've been doing just lately. But yeah, so I wanted to design this and swap it from a PAL to an NTSC so I could test NTSC software for them. I do have an NTSC SX64, but they're not they're sort of 99.9% compatible, but there is slight differences. So when we were testing one of the cartridges, it was doing a major hang when it was doing its decompressing. Only on the SX64 NTSC system without doing that. I don't know whether it'll do it on a PAL or not because I don't have one of them. But it certainly didn't do it on an NTSC Commodore 64, but did on the SX. So that's the reason why I wanted to change this over. The procedure to do this is exactly the same in reverse. So if you wanted to change the PAL system over to NTSC, then you would remove the VIC chip, which is a 6567, and replace it with a 6569 PAL chip, and then you would change the clock crystal, which is a 14 megahertz clock crystal, and you would put the PAL 17 megahertz clock crystal in there, and then there's a jumper setting to do, but I'll show you that as we're going through. And yeah, so if you wanted to do the other way around, then you just do it the other way around. It really is as simple as that, but I'll point out as we're going through, and I'll put some pictures of what we're going. So I didn't have an NTSC VIC. The only NTSC VIC chip I had was the one in my SX, And did I want to carry on stripping down my SX and swapping it into a a 64 to test it and then put it back in the SX, and then another one comes through and I do it again. I really don't want to be stripping the SX every single time I want to take the VIC chip out and put it into another system. The NTSC chips are fairly rare in the UK, so yeah, and I needed a spare one as well for the SX in case that ever went down. So I started searching on eBay and I come across a lad called Gary. I'll pop a picture up, and this was an NTSC system. Ignore the sticker that I've just put on the front here. So this system, look, I'll put pictures up. So I messaged Gary over the Facebook and said, have you got a buy it now price? Because it was a starting listing of 99p. And so I said, have you got a buy it now price in mind? I really want this NTSC system because I need the chips from it, etc. and stuff like that. He messaged me back and said, yeah, I've spoken to you before. I know who you are, Steve. How about I send you my personal Commodore 64 that's broken, and you fix that for me. In return, I'll give you this NTSC system. So that's what we did. He sent me this over free of charge. I then went into his system for him and started taking a look. So I cracked his system open, and one of the first things I noticed, he had the PLA replaced with a replacement PLA, the purple one with the 2 GAL chips. As you can see from this image, it wasn't sat in its socket, and it's also got a bent leg. So we have to sort that out first. So I lifted the chip out to have a look at it, and when I flipped it over, there's another leg missing off it. So that was pretty useless, wasn't it, for the PLA to start with. So I replaced this pin that you can see that's missing here now. I took out the socket that was on there. It was a turn pin socket, but it was very old and very difficult to get anything in there. So I just pulled it out and I put a double-sided leaf socket in there and dropped that PLA back in. So I thought, well, if somebody's been messing with this and playing around with this PLA chip, then it's fairly sure that they've probably been looking elsewhere. So I then popped off the tin lid off the VIC chip, and what did I find? There's a bent pin underneath the chip. So I straightened this leg up, we popped the chip back in. I messaged Gary and said, look, this is what I've found, and he said, yeah, it might be my fault, maybe I shouldn't be fixing these things when I'm drunk. Yeah, that's not a good idea, Gary. It's not a good idea. I've tried it before myself. I've been in similar situations. Don't do it. Whatever you do, alcohol and retro computer repairing, don't mix. So going back, when I started it up after I put that VIC in, I put the diagnostic cartridge in, put all the harness on it and everything, and we fired it up, and I got this screen that you can see there. It's just a load of garble, isn't it? But you can actually just see at the bottom there, and you can see the top with the dead test running. So you could see it was all running in the background. So I thought, well, that's a bit strange. So let's try some cartridges. So I dropped in Borderlands cartridge, and boom, it comes straight up, as you can see in that image there. It comes straight up, perfect. So I started thinking, right, okay, it's got to be a logic issue. If it's not a logic issue, then there's a trace damage on the PLA somewhere. So I popped the PLA back out. I found an old board that had been butchered in the past, not by me, I'll say, and I photographed where the PLA was so I could see where all the trace lines went, and just did multimeter continuity test and made sure all them pins went to the right places, etc. It did. So then I moved my focus and I thought, well, maybe it's one of the RAM logic. That's all it could be. Even when I booted the screen up with the cartridge in, you got the blue screen up. Didn't take an image of that, unfortunately. You get the blue screen up, and you could see what was going behind it, and you could see the cursor blinking as well, which led me to believe that everything was being displayed. So I thought, logic. I thought logic. Anyway, the night was getting on. It was getting a little bit late. I was looking at this logic chip, thinking about it. And then I thought, I've had this problem before. I've had the exact same problem before. What was it? What was it? And I started racking my brains, and I went downstairs, packed up for the evening, went downstairs, started having a cup of coffee, watching a bit of telly, and penny dropped. I remembered exactly what it was, and it was the character ROM. So I came back up, plugged the character ROM in, and boom. You can see in that little video that I popped up there, the screen's flashing away, cursor's flashing away, it's nice and clean. I then moved on to the dead test, run the dead test on it. Dead test passed, so I left it running and running and running. You can see on that screenshot there, we've got to count 52. I did leave it longer, it got over 100 and passed every single time. We put the Borderlands cartridge back in, and there was no sound. Zero sound from it at all. None. Not a flicker. So I just set it aside for 1 minute, and then we moved back to the NTSC system that it sent me. So I'm just going to lift the lid off this thing now. You're going to see there's no chips in it, and I'll explain why. So this is the NTSC system that it sent me. As you can see, I'll try and zoom it in if your focus goes out. It's in quite a sorry state. I would suspect on there that there is a lot of cold solder joints. He said that this unit came from an Air Force base where it was in a shed, where the shed had collapsed and it were under a load of rubble and moss. So yeah, it was pretty much baked in underground, if you like. I took all these chips out and I soaked them in white vinegar. White vinegar eats all the corrosion off the legs. If the legs are weak and it's getting pretty pitted, it'll take the legs off as well. You know, but that's just part and parcel of it. If you've got corroded legs, you're going to get a resistance in them anyway. So you need to know. So I dropped them all into white vinegar and left them for 24 hours in white vinegar. As you can see, the RF box there, very rusty. And so is the cartridge across the top. As I said, even looking at the capacitors, look, you can see the capacitors, the bulging, the corroded underneath there. And you can see them contacts in there. So I wasn't even going to attempt to start and try and restore this board. I could have used it for a donor board and put it on a 60s clone, but I didn't want to do that. I already had another revision, which was the 205425 board, which is the identical board to what this one is. So, after soaking the chips in the vinegar, I then proceeded and pulled out my ZIF 64 board that I created. If you want me watching me build this, if you have a look in my playlist, you'll come across creating the ZIF 64. This is my test bed, where I can just drop the chips out one by one and test them all. So the chip legs were pretty good. I still had to keep cleaning them up a little bit. I still had to sand them a little bit and clean them all up. So I started off and I took the SID out and I dropped the SID into this one, and it worked like a dream. It sung like a bird. I was absolutely gobsmacked. So I dropped the SID out and I put the PLA in, and the PLA, nothing, it's dead. Put the CPU in, nothing, it's dead. Put the kernel ROM in, fine. Put the character ROM in, fine. Basic ROM, dead. One of the CIAs, dead. And the other CIA was alive. So, out of that full set, out of that one, so I ended up taking the SID from the buried NTSC, and I took his character ROM out of this one and put it into his unit, and that's what brought it back to life. So that's now packed up and that's going back to Gary. It cost Gary nothing. He sent me this, didn't charge me postage to send it, so all it cost me is my time to sort that out and send it back to Gary, and now he's got his original Commodore 64 that's working again. Right, so that's a little bit of a backstory of what happened and what's come about me making this video of how to convert a Commodore 64 from NTSC to PAL and vice versa. So with that done, I'm going to move this one out of the way now. And I'm going to move the ZIF board out of the way. And we're going to come to the NTSC one that I've built and created. Now we're going to get down to nitty gritty. I'm just going to fill it off. Oops, let's sit this down. I'm not going to take the shielding off, I don't need to. Let's just take the keyboard connector off and we'll take that off and remove it out of the way. Right, so this is now an NTSC. So when it was a PAL, this had the 6569 VIC chip and it had the 17 megahertz clock crystal here, and it also had, as you can see just there, see if I can bring it a bit closer for you, see if I can balance it somewhere, see if you can see. That's a little bit better, isn't it? It's upside down, but you can see it. So you can see up there, there's the jumper that you either remove or you short. So you can see on there it says NTSC open or PAL short. You can just use something like a capacitor leg if you want to short it for PAL. So that's the clock crystal that we're changing, and there's the VIC chip. That's it. That's all you need to do, and you've done it. So this is what I did with this one. I stripped it all down. I pulled out because I was going from PAL to NTSC. So I pulled out the 6569 VIC. I pulled out the 17 megahertz clock crystal, and I cut the jumper off there because it was PAL. So I've replaced that VIC chip, and this is the VIC chip that was in the buried NTSC console that is soaked in vinegar, etc. So that's the VIC chip that I've done from the NTSC. Clock crystal, jumper, finished. So that's how you convert it to that, and vice versa. So if you wanted to go NTSC to PAL, you would do the flips way around it. So you would pull the NTSC 6567 chip out, you would take out the 14 megahertz clock crystal, and you would short that jumper. You'd then put the 6569 PAL VIC chip in, and you would put the 17 megahertz clock crystal into there, and that will convert it back to PAL. The RF side of things, it doesn't really matter because nobody who uses RF anyway, so you can get your S-video signal out of the back of there. The only thing that I do need to find, and I don't know whether it'll work, so I'm going to have a look and see whether my PVM will accept NTSC signal. When I power this one up, all it gives me is a smaller screen, more compact screen, and it's in grey at the moment on the screen that I use up here. I'll pop a picture up, you can see what it was running on the dead test there. So, flipping back, chatting with Gary, he's a really good lad. What I would suggest to do is, apparently he's selling a lot of his Commodore 64 things off. So I'll pop a picture of his name, eBay name up there. Have a look at him as a seller, see what items he's got for sale on the eBay. He did say he was selling a lot of Commodore 64 things off, and if there were anything that I were wanting to message him. So yeah, pop along and see Gary. He's a good lad. Chatted with him a lot. Very like-minded. So right, now you know how to convert a Commodore 64 from PAL to NTSC, or from NTSC to PAL. It's really easy. It's one of the simplest mods that I think anybody could do. Yeah, and the reasons behind why I wanted to do that, it were really nice to get that old unit that had come from that old RAF base and buried. The case is okay, the keyboard's good. I did get a couple of chips out of it. I think I got a CIA. I think the basic were okay, or kernel, can't quite remember now. The SID obviously went into Gary's system, and the character one went into Gary's system, and he's got that back now, and he's looking into getting some SD card readers or something like that and reviving it again. It was his original system, he said, from back in the day, so it's nice to reunite him with that. And it's also nice that I've now got an NTSC system for testing more games that are coming through. These games that are coming through, I'm not allowed to say where they come from. There's some cartridge games, there's some tape games, it's across all the 8-bit platforms, things like that. But when they come in, and as soon as I'm allowed to review them, I'll put them in the game's reviews. There should be a couple coming up shortly as well. I don't know when, because I don't know the release dates yet. So once I find that out, I'll be able to do the videos for you. So yeah, thanks very much for watching another episode of the 8-Bit Retro Refix. Give me a good thumbs up, will you please? Please consider unsubscribing and hitting the notification bell for all those up and coming videos. And on that note, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye!